Let's begin with the foundations. Welcome to another lecture. Today we consider Lanterns, an American television series that, as it were, takes the Green Lantern mythology and re-articulates it as a grounded investigation. I am Alexei. It is worth noting that our discussion will be both descriptive and analytic, with a few dry jokes carefully rationed for public safety.
Hi, I'm Priyanka, Professor Alexei's teaching assistant. I'll ask the obvious questions and a few slightly less obvious ones. And we'll try to keep the power ring set to low.
To frame our discussion, in lay terms, Lanterns is an HBO drama set in the DC universe. It focuses on two Green Lanterns, Hal Jordan and John Stewart, who investigate a murder in a small Nebraska town called Rushville. Think detectives with very unusual flashlights. It premiered in August 2026, runs 8 episodes, and stars Kyle Chandler as a seasoned Hal and Aaron Pierre as a newly recruited John. The tone is closer to True Detective than to a fireworks display, even though cosmic elements do surface.
So basically, it's a crime story first, and then the rings and space politics are like pressure from the edges.
Precisely. In more technical terms, it is positioned as a prestige drama embedded within a shared continuity. DC Studios' DCU, Chapter 1, Gods and Monsters. The narrative is bifurcated across 2016 and 2026, interlacing a local homicide with extraterrestrial implications touching the Guardians of the Universe, the Manhunters, and Sinestro. The showrunner, Chris Mundy, explicitly frames it as a whodunit rather than a whodunit. The series received a straight-to-series order from HBO in June 2024 and integrates DCU institutions like Checkmate and the interdimensional prison Salvation, without surrendering its small-town focus. For clarity of terms, the Green Lantern Corps is an interstellar police force. A power ring translates willpower into constructs and flight. The Guardians oversee the Corps. The Manhunters are their flawed android predecessors. And the Yellow Lanterns, led historically by Sinestro, weaponize fear.
Building on that, why is this approach relevant right now, both for TV trends and for the DCU's long game?
We observe a few converging dynamics. First, after a decade of maximalist superhero spectacle, there is audience appetite for grounded genre frames, detective, espionage, Americana crime, that can carry myth without constant CGI crescendo. Second, Warner Brothers Discovery strategically shifted big in-house IP from Max to HBO to signal event-level craft. Lanterns became an HBO original but streamed on Max, leveraging both brands. Third, weekly releases encourage speculation and communal theory making, which is mathematically favorable to a mystery's half-life. Within the DCU, anchoring cosmic lore to human institutions, sheriff's offices, families, rural politics, broadens entry points while seeding future arcs. Turning to basic facts, Lanterns was created by Chris Mundy, Damon Lindelof, and Tom King. The leads, Chandler and Pierre, balance veteran gravity with breakout presence. The premise is this: Hal, nearing retirement, trains John, a rare recruit chosen directly by the Guardians, as they probe a death that expands into questions of fear, oversight, and institutional memory. Directors include James Hawes, Stephen Williams, Geeta Vasant Patel, and Alik Sakharov. Cinematography is by Armando Salas and Florian Hofmeister. Production design by John Payno, and the score is by Stephanie Economou. The visual language is restrained, civilian clothes and muted suits, so that ring moments cut through the realism rather than saturate it.
And critics seem to like that choice. Post-release, Rotten Tomatoes had it at 95%, with an average around 7.65 out of 10, and Metacritic at 72. Reviewers praised the Chandler-Pierre chemistry and the character-first writing, even if some wanted more cosmic spectacle sooner.
Let's start with the history. Development stretches back to 2019, when Greg Berlanti's Green Lantern for HBO Max was conceived as a multi-era space opera, focusing on Alan Scott in 1941, Guy Gardner in 1984, and others. With Sinestro in space, Hal and John were then off limits. Corporate and creative realignments followed. Warner Media merged with Discovery in 2022. Seth Grahame-Smith exited. The focus pivoted to Jon Stewart. James Gunn and Peter Safran then established DC Studios, and in January 2023 announced Lanterns as an Earth-based detective series centered on Hal and John, designed to feed the DCU's larger storyline without rigid mandates. In 2024, HBO granted a straight-to-series order. Kyle Chandler and Aaron Pierre were cast in October 2024. Filming ran from February to July 2025 in Los Angeles and at Warner Brothers Burbank, with Piru, California doubling for Rushville. Marketing began grounded, few suits, little green, and later trailers surfaced Sinestro, fear iconography, and fuller ring constructs. The show premiered in August 2026, with weekly episodes through October 2026. This logically leads us to key casting as tone setting. Chandler's Hal is world-weary, echoing Sam Shepard's Jaeger and a Murtaugh-like older partner energy. Pierre's John is disciplined and creative, uniquely Guardian-selected, and interpreted with understated force. Nathan Fillion's Guy Gardner bridges to the Superman film. Ulrich Thompson's Sinestro leans charming and ruthless, and Laura Linney appears as a guardian. These choices collectively forecast the show's equilibrium between small-town texture and looming cosmic governance. Speaking of structures, a personal note. I am professionally interested in how timelines and point of view distribute information density. Lantern's interleaving of 2016 and 2026, plus its why done it ethos, uses character friction as an instrument. It is akin to a chess endgame where tempo, not merely material, determines advantage. The ring constructs are the queens, yes, but the pawns, interviews, diner booths, family living rooms, decide the file. As we continue, we will frame 3 questions to organize the unresolved and the counterfactual.
Professor, how did Lanterns overcome the historical challenges faced by previous Green Lantern adaptations?
It's important to understand the primary challenge. Green Lantern often tilts toward maximalist visuals that can eclipse character grounding. Lanterns inverts the ratio. It relocates the myth to Sheridan County, Nebraska, privileges procedure over pyrotechnics, and constrains spectacle to purposeful beats. Production design favors tactile Americana. Costumes avoid slick futurism. Cinematography uses overcast plains and sodium vapor nights. Editorial pacing trusts performance over constant escalation. Crucially, the narrative design, 2 time frames, mentor-rookie friction, a why done it, allows the rings to be tools rather than crutches. By integrating DCU connective tissue through institutions like Checkmate and sites like Salvation, it expands scope laterally rather than vertically. Mathematically, this lowers variance in tone episode to episode, while preserving spikes of wonder.
Professor, could you clarify the role of the show's creators in that transformation?
Chris Mundy, as showrunner, operationalized the prestige crime grammar he honed on Ozark and True Detective Season 4. Measured pace, moral ambiguity, and places character. Tom King, who originally pitched the series, contributed comics literacy and institutional texture. His background also sharpened tradecraft details. Damon Lindelof supplied mythic scaffolding and theme cohesion. He understands how to withhold reveals without breaking trust. James Gunn and Peter Safran, for their part, established boundary conditions, connective waypoints but no mandated end state, granting creative freedom to define Jon Stewart and recalibrate Hal Jordan. The straight-to-series order from HBO provided stability, and locked scripts at the start of filming kept tone consistent. Next, let's explore a counterfactual. Initially, Berlanti's HBO Max series targeted multiple eras. Alan Scott in 1941, Guy Gardner in 1984, and a spacefaring Sinestro, while Hal and John were reserved for cinema.
Professor Alexei, what if the Berlanti-led series had proceeded unchanged?
We can infer several divergences. Tonally, we likely would have received an anthology-like, multi-timeline space opera, with period texture. A closeted Alan Scott in 1941, a hyper-patriotic Guy Gardner in 1984, and characters such as Bree Jarta and Kilowog moving through broader cosmic lanes. The gravitational center would shift from Nebraska diners to sector maps. Continuity-wise, the absence of Hal and John on television would have delayed or reframed their DCU introductions, narrowing the buddy cop axis now central to Chapter 1's texture. Industrially, it would have remained a Max original rather than an HBO-branded event, signaling a different prestige posture. And aesthetically, suits and constructs would be more omnipresent early on, increasing audience cognitive load, advantageous for lore-forward fans and potentially exclusionary for newcomers.
Could that path have impacted the broader DCU strategy?
Arguably, yes. The DCU's present approach relies on tonal diversification with institutional continuity. Gardner crossing from Superman into Lanterns, Checkmate and Salvation threading projects, a space-forward multi-era series not plugged into an older Hal, and a newly chosen John might have operated as a parallel canon or demanded later retrofits. It could also have complicated the brand's post-merger alignment, HBO as the prestige tentpole home, by leaving a major mythology pillar on Max alone. Finally, on character development, Jon Stewart's unique Guardian-selected status is now a thematic keystone. In the earlier plan, John was not the center, which would alter how the DCU interrogates authority, selection, and merit across titles. On to our next point, the present-day open questions. The series was warmly received, but debates persist about narrative allocation. How much time should be accorded to character study versus overt cosmic spectacle? And about the pacing of myth reveals across 8 hours.
Professor Alexei, what are the unresolved questions regarding Lanterns today?
Several remain. First, scope calibration, Season 1 surface Sinestro, fear iconography, and the Manhunters judiciously. The open question is how far and how fast Season 2, if ordered, should expand the Yellow Lantern conflict without eroding the show's human spine. Second, institutional fallout. Jon Stewart's exceptional recruitment by the Guardians creates pressure within the core. The long-term implications for governance and mentorship are only partially explored. Third, DCU integration rate. Lanterns seeds Salvation and Checkmate, but there is debate over the optimal density of such connective tissue for a prestige drama. And a minor but instructive marketing footnote persists in fandom memory. The initial teaser's temporary takedown. Entertainment Weekly clarified it was due to an expired music license, not creative second thoughts, yet it illustrates how rumor ecosystems can skew reception metrics early.
Isn't it interesting how the show's quiet tone actually magnifies these debates? If the series had gone bigger and louder, the argument would just move to a different axis. But here, the restraint makes every choice measurable.
Indeed. To elaborate, the quieter register creates a high signal-to-noise ratio. Deviations are legible. For further research, one could examine audience retention as a function of deferred spectacle. Compare social discussion networks episode by episode against the timing of myth reveals, and model how institutional crossovers, say Gardner's entries, affect engagement without tonal breakage. More broadly, tracking how Lantern's calibrated approach influences subsequent DCU titles would test whether grounded first, spectacle second, becomes a recurring template or remains a singular fit for this mythology.
So, to close the circle, Lanterns is a character-driven detective drama inside the DCU, with Hal Jordan as a seasoned mentor and Jon Stewart as a uniquely chosen recruit, probing a Nebraska murder that opens into cosmic oversight. It's HBO calibrated, 8 episodes, weekly, and intentionally mixes small-town texture with selective sci-fi.
To summarize, we asked 3 questions. First, how Lanterns overcame adaptation history. It inverted the spectacle ratio and trusted procedure and character. Second, the counterfactual of a Berlanti space opera. Likely rich in timelines but poorer in the Hal-John dynamic now anchoring the DCU. Third, the present open questions. How to scale cosmic elements, clarify institutional consequences, and tune integration density. For further study, consider the evolution of superhero adaptations from maximalist cinema toward genre-forward television, how form shapes myth. Thank you for your attention. Your willpower has been exemplary, and no rings were required.
Thank you for listening. Take care, and we'll see you for another lecture soon.